Isabelle Carter stood in front of her floor-to-ceiling mirror, staring at the woman she was about to become. The penthouse suite behind her gleamed with marble and gold, a testament to generations of wealth. But tonight, none of that mattered. She slipped off her diamond bracelet, the one her grandmother had given her on her 21st birthday. Then the earrings. Then the Cartier watch. Each piece felt like shedding a layer of armor she had worn her entire life. From her closet, she pulled out clothes she had bought that afternoon from a thrift store in Brooklyn. A simple cotton dress in navy blue. Worn sneakers. A canvas tote bag instead of her usual Hermes. She tied her hair in a loose ponytail and applied minimal makeup, the kind that said, "I tried, but not too hard." Looking at her reflection, Isabelle barely recognized herself. And that was exactly the point. This wasn't the first blind date her mother had arranged. There had been dozens over the years. Investment bankers who spent dinner calculating her net worth. Heirs to tech fortunes who saw her as a merger, not a person. Actors who wanted access to her family's connections. She was tired. Tired of being seen as a walking bank account. Tired of smiling through conversations with men who looked at her jewelry before they looked at her eyes. So when her assistant mentioned this particular setup, Isabelle made a decision. She would go. But she would go as someone else. Someone ordinary. Someone who could be loved for who she was, not what she had. The cafe was in the West Village, tucked between a bookstore and a flower shop. It was the kind of place Isabelle would never normally visit, which made it perfect. Small wooden tables, mismatched chairs, and the smell of fresh coffee and cinnamon rolls. She arrived 10 minutes early, ordering a simple black coffee and choosing a table by the window. Her hands trembled slightly as she wrapped them around the warm cup. What if this was a mistake? What if he saw through her immediately? The door chimed. Isabelle looked up, and her breath caught in her throat. Walking through that door, in a crisp white shirt with the sleeves rolled up and dark jeans, was Ethan Blake. The Ethan Blake, CEO of Blake Industries, the youngest person to ever make the Forbes Billionaires list. She had seen his face in business magazines, heard her father mention his name with equal parts admiration and envy. What was he doing here? At a blind date? In a cafe that probably cost less than his morning dry cleaning? Ethan scanned the room with sharp gray eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. When his gaze landed on her, something shifted in his expression. Not recognition exactly, but interest. He walked over with confident strides, and Isabelle's carefully constructed plan suddenly felt very fragile. "Bella?" he asked, using the name she had given to her assistant. "Yes." Her voice came out steadier than she expected. "You must be Ethan." "I must be." He smiled, and it transformed his entire face. The cold CEO from the magazine covers disappeared, replaced by someone warm and disarmingly genuine. "I hope you haven't been waiting long." "Just got here." He sat down across from her, and for a moment, they just looked at each other. Isabelle felt exposed under his gaze, as if those gray eyes could see past her thrift store dress and into the truth she was hiding. "I have to admit," Ethan said, leaning back in his chair, "I almost cancelled. Blind dates aren't usually my thing." "Mine either," Isabelle confessed, and that much was true. "So why did you say yes?" The question hung between them, weighted with more meaning than he could possibly know. "I guess I was curious," she said carefully. "Sometimes you have to take a chance on the unknown." "The unknown." Ethan repeated the words like he was tasting them. "I like that. In my line of work, everything is calculated, predicted, analyzed. The unknown is rare." "What line of work is that?" He hesitated, and Isabelle saw something flicker across his face. A decision being made. "Business consulting," he said finally. "I help companies restructure and optimize. It's exciting on paper, exhausting in reality." Isabelle bit back a smile. So he was hiding too. The great Ethan Blake, pretending to be an ordinary consultant. She wondered what he was running from. "What about you?" he asked. "What does a freelance graphic designer do when she's not meeting mysterious men in village cafes?" "I create identities for people," she said, and it wasn't entirely a lie. She did have a degree in design, even if she had never needed to use it professionally. Logos, branding, the face they want to show the world. "The face they want to show the world," Ethan echoed. "That's interesting. So you help people become who they want to be seen as, not necessarily who they are." His words cut closer than he knew. "Sometimes the person you want to be seen as is closer to your truth than the person everyone expects you to be," Isabelle said quietly. Ethan leaned forward, his eyes intense. "I think that's the smartest thing anyone said to me in months." They talked for hours. The coffee went cold, forgotten. Outside, the autumn sun set over the city, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Ethan told her about the pressure of expectations, the weight of always having to be perfect, strong, in control. She told him about the loneliness of never being seen for yourself, always being measured against what you could provide for others. They discovered they both loved old movies, the kind filmed in black and white. They both hated networking events. They both sometimes stood on their balconies late at night, looking at the city lights and feeling utterly alone. "I feel like I can breathe around you," Ethan said as they finally stepped outside. The street was quiet now, shops closing for the evening. "Like I don't have to perform." Isabelle's chest tightened with guilt. "I know what you mean." "Can I see you again?" he asked. "Tomorrow? The day after? Whenever you're free." She should have said no. Should have ended this before it went any further. But when she looked into his eyes, she saw something she hadn't seen in any man's eyes before. He was looking at her. Just her. Not her name, not her connections, not her potential value. "Tomorrow," she heard herself say. "There's a small gallery in Chelsea. Photography exhibit. It opens at noon. I'll be there." He reached for her hand, and the touch sent electricity up her arm. "Bella?" "Yes?" "Thank you for taking a chance on the unknown." She watched him walk away, his hands in his pockets, and felt her carefully constructed walls begin to crack. The next 3 weeks were the happiest of Isabelle's life. And the most terrifying. They met in quiet corners of the city. Art galleries where they could lose themselves in paintings and conversation. Small restaurants where the food was excellent and the crowds were thin. The High Line at sunset, walking slowly while tourists rushed past. Ethan was different than anyone she had ever known. He listened when she talked, really listened, his full attention on her words. He made her laugh with dry observations about the absurdity of modern life. He shared his fears and insecurities with a vulnerability that took her breath away. And every day, the lie grew heavier. She had created an entire fictional life. An apartment in Queens that didn't exist. Freelance clients she had invented. Stories about growing up middle class, about working her way through college, about learning to make every dollar count. Some of it was based on friends' experiences. Some of it she simply made up on the spot. And with each invention, each small deception, she hated herself a little more. But she couldn't stop. Because when she was with Ethan, she felt free. Free from the weight of her family name. Free from the expectations and the judgment and the endless parade of people who wanted something from her. With him, she was just Bella. A woman who loved art and old movies and long walks through the city. A woman who could be loved for herself. One evening, they sat on a bench in Washington Square Park. Students played guitar nearby, and the air smelled of roasted nuts from a nearby vendor. "I have to tell you something," Ethan said, his voice serious. Isabelle's heart stopped. He knew. Somehow, he had figured it out. "I've been lying to you," he continued, not meeting her eyes. "About my job. I'm not a consultant. My work is more complicated than that. More visible. I didn't tell you because I wanted you to know me, not my position. Not what I could offer you. Relief and guilt washed over her in equal measure. I understand, she said softly. Sometimes we hide parts of ourselves because we're afraid of how people will react. You're not angry? No. She took his hand. I think I know why you did it. He looked at her then, really looked at her, and she saw something shift in his expression. A question forming. A realization dawning. Bella, he said slowly. Who are you? Really? Her mouth went dry. What do you mean? I mean, you talk about art like someone who's studied it formally, not as a hobby. Your vocabulary, your references, the way you carry yourself. Last week, you mentioned dining at Le Bernardin like it was nothing, but that restaurant is $500 a plate. And your hands. He lifted her hand gently. These aren't the hands of someone who's struggled financially. The skin is too soft. The nails too perfect. Isabelle felt the world tilting beneath her. I'm not interrogating you, Ethan said quickly. I want to know you. All of you. Not just the parts you think are safe to show me. She should have told him then. Should have confessed everything. But fear held her tongue. Fear that this perfect bubble would burst. That he would look at her differently. That everything would change. I'm just me, she whispered. Isn't that enough? Ethan studied her face for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Yes. You're more than enough. But she could see the question lingering in his eyes. And she knew she was running out of time. The invitation arrived on a Tuesday morning, delivered by courier to Isabelle's real penthouse address. Blake Industries' annual charity gala. Black tie. The Plaza Hotel. Isabelle stared at the cream-colored card with growing dread. Every year, her family attended this event. Her father, CEO of Carter Jewels, was one of the evening's major sponsors. She was expected to be there, representing the family, wearing their latest designs. There was no way to avoid it. No excuse she could make. And no way to continue hiding who she really was. She called Ethan that afternoon, her hands shaking. I can't see you this weekend, she said. Something's come up. Everything okay? The concern in his voice made her chest ache. Yes. Just, family stuff. I'll explain later. Bella. He paused. Whatever you're worried about, whatever you think might change things between us, it won't. I promise. She wanted to believe him. But promises were easy to make before you knew the truth. The night of the gala, Isabelle stood in her bedroom, transformed back into the woman she had spent weeks trying to escape. Her dress was a custom creation, emerald green silk that hugged every curve and flowed like water when she moved. Diamonds glittered at her throat, her wrists, her ears, Carter Jewels' latest collection, worth more than most people made in a decade. Her hair was swept up in an elegant chignon, her makeup flawless and dramatic. She looked like herself again. Isabelle Carter, heiress. Not Bella, the freelance designer from Queens. The Plaza Ballroom was magnificent, dripping with crystal chandeliers and overflowing with New York's elite. Isabelle moved through the crowd with practiced grace, accepting air kisses and hollow compliments, her smile never faltering. She was searching the room, though she wouldn't admit it. Looking for him. Dreading the moment she would see him. Knowing it was inevitable. Isabelle. Her mother appeared at her elbow, resplendent in silver. The Morgans are asking about the spring collection. Come say hello. She let herself be pulled into another conversation, another performance. Playing her part. Being who everyone expected her to be. And then she saw him. Ethan stood near the bar, devastating in a tailored tuxedo, talking to a group of business executives. He looked comfortable here, confident, every inch the powerful CEO she had seen in magazines. This was his world too. She had forgotten that. Their eyes met across the room, and she watched the recognition hit him. Watched his expression shift from surprise to confusion to something that looked almost like pain. He excused himself from his conversation and started walking toward her, his gaze never leaving her face. "Excuse me," Isabelle murmured to her mother, her heart pounding so hard she thought everyone must be able to hear it. They met in a quiet alcove, away from the main crowd. For a moment, neither of them spoke. "Isabelle Carter," Ethan said finally. His voice was carefully neutral. "Heiress to Carter Jewels. Net worth approximately $3 billion. Bachelor's degree from Yale, master's in design from Parsons. Featured in Forbes 30 Under 30 list 2 years ago." Each word felt like a stone dropping into water, sending ripples through everything they had built. "Ethan." All this time, he continued, and now she could hear the hurt beneath the control. "You let me talk about the pressure of wealth, the burden of expectations, and you said nothing. You were living the same life, facing the same challenges, and you pretended to be someone else entirely." "I wasn't pretending," Isabelle said desperately. "Not about the important things. Everything I felt, everything I shared with you, that was real." "Was it? Because I don't even know who you are." "Was any of it true? The apartment in Queens? The freelance work? The struggles you described?" "I wanted you to see me," she said, tears burning her eyes. "Not my last name. Not my bank account. Not the heiress everyone expects me to be. I wanted one person, just one, to love me for who I actually am." "But who you actually are includes being Isabelle Carter," Ethan said, his voice softer now. "That's part of you. You can't just erase it and expect people to know the real you." "I know." The tears spilled over, and she didn't care who saw. "I know I was wrong. I was a coward. But Ethan, please understand. Every man I've ever dated, every friend I've ever had, they all wanted something from me. My connections. My money. Access to my family. I've never been loved for myself, just for what I could provide. And then I met you, and for the first time in my life, someone saw past all of that. You didn't give me the chance to see anything," he said. "You made the choice for me. You decided I wasn't worthy of the truth." The words cut deep because they were accurate. "You're right," she whispered. "I'm sorry." Ethan looked at her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he did something that surprised her. He smiled. It was a sad smile, but it was genuine. "I have a confession too," he said quietly. "I knew." Isabelle's heart stopped. "What?" "After our second date, I knew who you were. One of my assistants mentioned seeing me at that cafe, asked if I was meeting with Carter Jewels about a collaboration. It wasn't hard to put together." He stepped closer. "I had your full background by the next morning." She felt like the ground had disappeared beneath her feet. "You knew? This whole time, you knew, and you said nothing?" "I wanted to see how long you'd keep up the charade," he admitted. "I was curious. Maybe a little hurt that you felt you had to lie. But mostly, I wanted to understand why." "And do you understand?" "Yes." He reached up, gently wiping a tear from her cheek. "Because I've been there. Standing in a room full of people who only see your net worth, your connections, your utility. Never just you. I understand the desperate need to be seen as a person, not a portfolio." "Then why didn't you tell me you knew?" "For the same reason you didn't tell me the truth. I was afraid. Afraid that if you knew I knew, you'd disappear. That the spell would break. That Bella would vanish and I'd be left with just another heiress playing games." He took her hands in his. "But here's what I realized. Bella and Isabelle aren't two different people. They're both you. The woman who loves art galleries and old movies, who talks about design with passion, who sits in parks and watches the world go by, that's the real you. And the woman standing here in diamonds and designer silk, carrying the weight of family expectations, that's also the real you. I don't know how to be both," Isabelle confessed. "Then we'll figure it out together." He smiled, and this time it reached his eyes. Hi, I'm Ethan Blake, CEO of Blake Industries, workaholic, terrible at relationships, terrified of commitment. But somehow, despite my best efforts, I've fallen completely in love with a woman who thinks she has to hide who she is to be loved. Fresh tears spilled down Isabelle's cheeks, but these were different. These were relief and hope and joy all mixed together. Hi, she said, laughing through her tears. I'm Isabelle Carter. Heiress, coward, liar. But I'm also the woman who falls asleep during art house films, who talks to pigeons in the park, who wants nothing more than to be seen for who she really is. And I'm completely, terrifyingly in love with a man who somehow saw through all my lies to the truth underneath. So, Ethan said, pulling her closer. What do we do now? Now? Isabelle looked up at him, this man who had seen all of her, the privileged heiress and the vulnerable woman hiding beneath, and loved her anyway. Now we start over. No more disguises. No more secrets. Just us. Real, messy, complicated us. I like the sound of that. He leaned down and kissed her, there in the alcove while the gala continued around them, while the city glittered outside the windows, while their two worlds finally collided and became one. When they finally pulled apart, Isabelle rested her forehead against his, breathing him in. I'm still sorry, she whispered. For lying. For not trusting you. I'm sorry too, he said. For playing games. For testing you instead of just being honest. We're quite a pair, aren't we? The worst. He grinned. Two emotionally stunted billionaires who don't know how to be vulnerable. We should probably get therapy. Definitely. She laughed. But maybe together. Together, he agreed. Everything together from now on. No more masks. No more hiding. No more hiding, she echoed, and felt the weight she'd been carrying for weeks finally lift from her shoulders. They walked back into the ballroom hand in hand, and Isabelle felt the stares, heard the whispers. Ethan Blake and Isabelle Carter. Two of the city's most eligible singles. The gossip columns would have a field day. But for once, she didn't care. Let them talk. Let them speculate. Because standing beside her was someone who knew her, really knew her, and loved her anyway. Her mother caught her eye across the room, one eyebrow raised in question. Isabelle just smiled and squeezed Ethan's hand tighter. You ready for this? He murmured. Your family will have questions. So will mine. The media will be relentless. Honestly? I'm terrified. Good. He kissed her temple. Me too. But I'd rather be terrified with you than safe with anyone else. As they moved through the crowd together, Isabelle realized something. She had spent so long trying to escape who she was, to hide from the privilege and expectations that came with her name. But maybe the answer wasn't to run from it or to pretend it didn't exist. Maybe the answer was to find someone who understood. Someone who lived in the same world but saw past it to the person underneath. She didn't have to choose between Bella and Isabelle. She could be both. The heiress and the dreamer. The businesswoman and the artist. The public figure and the private person. She could be whole. Finally, completely, messily whole. And she could be loved. Not despite who she was, but because of it. All of it. 3 months later, they were back in that same cafe in the West Village. The place where it had all begun. Where she had walked in wearing thrift store clothes and he had walked in wearing a lie. I can't believe we're back here, Isabelle said, wrapped in a comfortable sweater, her hair loose, no diamonds in sight. Just her. Just them. I like it here, Ethan said, reaching across the small table to take her hand. This is where I met the real you. Both versions. All versions. And you still love me? Even knowing how broken and complicated I am. Especially because of that. He lifted her hand to his lips. You know what I realized? Everyone wears masks. Everyone hides parts of themselves they're afraid won't be acceptable. You just had the courage to take yours off, even if it took you a while to get there. We both did, she reminded him. We both did, he agreed. Outside, the city moved on, oblivious to their story. But in that small cafe, with mismatched chairs and the smell of coffee and cinnamon rolls, two people who had been hiding finally found a place where they could be seen. And that, Isabelle thought, was worth more than all the diamonds in her family's vault. So what do you think? Was Isabelle right to disguise herself and test Ethan's intentions? Or should she have been honest from the start? And what about Ethan? Was it fair for him to continue the relationship knowing her real identity, or should he have confronted her immediately? These are the messy, complicated questions we face when we're afraid of being hurt. When we've been used so many times that trust feels impossible. When we're desperate to be loved for who we are, not what we have. Leave your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear your perspective on this story of masks, vulnerability, and the courage it takes to love someone fully. If you enjoyed this journey through the heart of two people learning to be real with each other, please subscribe to the channel and hit that notification bell. We have so many more stories coming, stories of love found in unexpected places, of second chances and impossible choices, of people fighting for connection in a world that tries to keep them apart. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening to this story all the way to the end. Your time means everything, and I'm grateful you chose to spend it with us. Until next time, remember, sometimes the bravest thing you can do is take off your mask and let yourself be seen. See you in the next story.